Watching time here. Do y'all want me to go over the final paper today, or are you okay to wait till next week? Yes, Sam said yes. Okay. Yes, good. All right. Give me a moment to pull it up. I looked at the syllabus. It would be there. That's me.
I almost sent it to, so I've been working on it for like the last week. I worked on it last week, and I was like, I wonder if she would get upset if I sent it to her and said, "Hey, is this remotely what you're looking for?"
Yes. That would always be fine. I just have to find the syllabus now. Syllabus, there it is. All right. Oh, yes. Okay. Design a comprehensive. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. So, why don't I start with that? How's that sound? We're going to start with just going over the final paper, and as with all of my courses, for those of you who've had me, and warning for those of you who have not, it's meant to be practical, realizing you may never be able to implement it, also realizing that it may not be for your setting, but of course, part of what I'm also looking for is, hi, Chrissy, we are working with, I'm talking about the final assignment. And so saying that even though you may not be able to implement it where you are, it may be that that if you're not in a setting where, I'm understanding that some of you only have worship, or you're in very, very small congregations, then create a scenario. Or Cheryl, you're not exactly in that kind of congregational setting. So create a scenario and let me know what the scenario is, right? So what are we working with? Yeah. So for all of us, what we're going to do is account for our context. And for those of you who just got to join us, I'm talking about the final assignment right now. So what you're going to do is come up with the disciple making plan. And what specifically I'm looking for is not merely Christian education, but I want you to be working on building disciples. And what we're going to be working with this week are ways of measuring spiritual growth for people. So, and more so than spiritual growth, it's moving people from being not yet Christians to Christians to disciples. And then in two of the resources, you'll see that I call them missionaries. And then there's also one called apostles. Apostles are those who go out and go away. So when I think in terms of apostles, I'm thinking of church planters. Okay, so those and missionaries are those who really are taking their faith in it out with them. Everyone is called to be a minimum of a neighborhood missionary, right? So missionaries are those who are not merely living the gospel, but they're inviting others very actively into the gospel, right? And we may not be able to evangelize the world. We may not be able to be missionaries to go out beyond our neighborhood, let alone our community. But it starts with who's your neighbor? Literally, who's your neighbor, right? Do you know the name of your neighbors on your street, or on your hallway in your apartment building? So that's really where I'm trying to get us to with being a missionary. And how do we prepare people to do that? And how are we building them to do that? And then apostles being those who really do go out beyond. I would say that that's traditionally what we've thought of being missionaries, but I want us to think bigger than that. So when you see those two resources this week, and let me pull them back up. Um, Bear with me here. I need that one, modules. Thank you. They're called the comprehensive leadership comprehensive leadership competencies milestones, and then there's one for coaching. And so in those, you'll see, how do we move people? What are the marks? Like, if pre-Christian, if how do we move people from being pre-Christian to Christian, right? We have to have a growing awareness of a higher power, and then that higher power gets a name called God or Almighty. And to become a Christian, you have to have a sense of who Jesus is, right? So how are we doing that? And then this accompanying piece to it's a comprehensive leadership competencies coaching. And so it's ways of really checking that with people. Okay, so I needed to say that as I go back to talking about the final assignment, that we want to account for our context, and then what are we going to try and do? Are we going to try to help people ultimately become not merely disciples, right? Disciple or not merely Christians, that we kind of leave them in the baptistry or at their profession of faith. How are we helping people really to live out their faith, that discipling? And in that case, you're going to have a discipling ministry. And then how are we going to help them become missionaries? How are we preparing them really to have a heart for their neighbors, to invite their neighbors to come? And then are we going to be trying to raise up church planters, people who are going to go out beyond our doors? So what you need to do is create that plan. What are you doing? What's your context? What's reality for you? Again, you may have to create a context. What I hope is that you're able to, if you will, manipulate the information that you receive from me, right? Your learnings, so that it's not only for your context, but will you be able to use it in other contexts? I recently had a student say to me in their final assignment that what they learned was that they needed to leave their church, that the kind of ministry that they are called to do, their experiences and giftings weren't able to fully express them in their current congregational setting. And so what their next steps are one of their next steps is to leave. But I hope that, and I trust that he has the grounding and what he needs to be able to use that information in a different setting, right? Let's see what else. So you need to account for, how are you going to recruit your leaders? How are you going to train, mentor them? How will you help develop them, apprentice them? How will you mobilize, continuing working with them? How will you evaluate them? Again, you may not have those pieces together, and you'll get the more information as you go. And I always love to see what you come up with for how you're going to do this. You'll see on there, if you haven't already looked at it, that it says, double space, these many pages. I just want you to be creative and do it the way that works for you. Okay, so sometimes people use pictures, charts, create tables, whatever I really just want you to make it yours, make it usable for you, and communicate. I'm looking for have did you are you using the materials, right? Did you like engage the materials? And are you able to manipulate, play with the materials, right? And you don't fail if you're not able to utilize the materials, right? But the grade goes up the more you're able to incorporate and integrate. Does that make sense? Did it scare you? Yeah. Don't be.
So I'm sorry.
No, please.
So it's actually going to be a very practical scenario for us because our faith formation, our temporary faith formation director is terming out at the end of December. So our pastors were like, "Hey Sam, come up with this plan of who, what, when, and where." And then I was reading the assignment, the syllabus, and I was like, well, this is what she wants. So that's the reason why I started working on it already, because they approached me and was like, so you're taking Christian Ed. So it'll be a very practical part with what will potentially be and not enforced but utilized from the
Yes,
congregation.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I love your pastors, your leadership. I do. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Sam is today's poster child. There we go.
That's a very bad poster.
No. No. I mean, that's what I want to see. And, as detailed as you're able to make it, think, 1, 2, 3 years out, build your bridge from where you are to where you want to be, what you want to look at. I don't know that has it in there or not. Let's see. Yeah, the steps you'll take to implement your plan and account for evaluation. How will you evaluate people? Which I'm going to say more about today as well. All right. I will tell you, Clinton is another one of the resources for this week. Where are you? I would pull these up, but I had said, oh, darn. I got my new computer yesterday, and my husband was so excited about it that he has set it up for me. And there are, of course, complications with that. I was up there this morning looking, and Clinton is not loading, and I don't know how to find it at this point. So I'll get that up there. I love Clinton's work. He wrote a book called Making of a Leader. I'm expecting the updated version any day from Amazon, and he is much more, I think, the word I want to use, maybe charismatic than we are. What he talks about are phases of leadership, and that we all go through these different phases. And so we want to help people, of course, especially people that we see with that gift, that capacity and even capability grow in their leadership ability. And so he's going to talk about that. What he does with that are experiences people need to have or will have. I will say, I get this question every time about, do we create these circumstances for them, or these experiences for them? Some of them you can't. Did I do this, Sam, in another use Clinton in another class because it feels very recent since I've had this conversation, right? You really can't create a lot of them. There'll be crises people have in their lives. They're going to go backward and forward. Clinton I say he's charismatic because he uses language that is not readily accessible or understandable for us in the mainline. So I had to read the book during my doctoral program. I had to read it for 3 different classes. And finally, by the 3rd class, I did an outline. So I've spared you from the book, but you do have the outline that hopefully will help you a bit more. So you'll see I think he calls them learning checks along the way. And I hope that you'll find it interesting and that it will also provide you with language when people are experiencing these different things in their lives. It's not that God sends them to us, but God allows us to experience them, right? And how they can benefit us. And that it helped me as well discover language and being able to point things out to people so that they were able to stay more connected to God, and then to be thinking into how might they be able to use that along the way. Okay, questions, thoughts? We still have what, 3 more weeks, I think. So as you come up with ideas or thoughts, we can talk about them. You can call me or set up to call me. My scheduler is not working, and that's another thing I don't know how to fix at this place and time, but just email me, we'll figure it out. Okay? Okay. All right, so there are a couple pieces I want to go over before. Well, maybe I should ask you all. Questions? Do you have questions? Other questions for me today? We're good? Okay, awesome. All right, I want to talk a little bit. I wanted to talk about outputs, outcomes, and impact. And then we're going to talk about methods of evaluations. Amy Blackman can't be here today, but she has questions about using surveys. And so I want to address that as well. All right. So we talk about outputs and outcomes. All right. Output is probably what we put out, right? On Sunday mornings, let's say we go and for sake of argument, we have adult Sunday school and we give them books. And what the question of output is, what do we want them to walk away with, right? It's more immediate. Those immediate results. Did they learn a Bible passage? Did they get exposure to a scripture? Did they get helps for how they might use that scripture or whatever that topic was? Those are those outcomes. They're the more or output, immediate results. Then there are outcomes. Outcomes we measure longer. Okay, so they're not as immediate results. Okay, so output would be what happens on Sunday. Then the outcome is, what difference are you seeing in these people? Here's my favorite example of this. When we went to plant the church up in Seattle, we lived in this little apartment and started a youth group. And it was crazy, absolutely crazy. We would have 25 kids on Wednesday evenings in this itty bitty apartment. And like my little reminders of youth ministry from decades ago were like, how do we do group mixes? And so one of my more bad attempts was the game where you put animals on, like animal names on the back of everybody's back, and then you go up there and you'd say something like meow, and they'd have to guess, oh, I'm a cat. Well, 25 kids can't move around like this. So there was, I don't know, you can still get them in some places. I don't think though they're publishing them anymore. There was a Bible series called Serendipity. Do any of you remember or know Serendipity? If you can get your hands on it, it's awesome. Serendipity Bibles, all throughout the Bible, they take sections of it, and it has three different, for each section, it's got three parts. And so the one is like an icebreaker. And then the second is some information about that section. And then the third is application, or dig deeper, actually dig deeper. And it's all conversational, so that anybody can take the Serendipity Bible, pick it up, go to any passage, and you can do it right then and there. It's just really, it's a great tool. And they have them for youth, they have them for adults. So with the youth, one of the recommended usages was, if you've got a youth group, that you take the Bible, and the students would write their names in them, and then they would pass that to the person next to them, who passed it around the circle, and everybody wrote their name, and I think they had contact information. This was early cell phone, so kids didn't have cell phones at that time. So we would pass them around, and then and we would look, and we'd have these conversations. Okay, so output, kids are learning something about a Bible. They got a Bible. We paid for all of that, and they're learning stories. So here was outcome. One day, kids come, and we live in an apartment complex. We live on the middle floor, and 2 apartments up, 2 apartments down, 1 across. And um, and these boys come, and they probably were in 3rd grade, and they're really upset because the boy who lived upstairs and across the hall wasn't going to be there that evening, or that afternoon. And the reason was, he'd gotten in trouble after school. The reason he got in trouble after school was they blamed him for something that he didn't do. And the one of them did it willfully. He just out and out flat lied. And so it was so heavy on their hearts. When they got there, I said, "So what are you going to do about that?" And they said, "Well, we know we need to go up there and talk to his mom and see if he'll forgive us." And so they left the group right there, and they went upstairs, and they knocked on the door, and they came back down with the little boy. That's outcome, right? That's outcome. A third part of this, so you may be familiar, especially with, business or planning, that there's output and outcome. There's also impact. Impact is longer term, right? This is something that's not quickly measured, or maybe even easily measured. So for me now, knowing about impact, I would want to know how that apartment complex is different, right? Was there an impact there? How is my neighborhood different because of that? And then, okay, so now I'm gonna, if I were still there, still near that apartment complex, I would want to know, maybe, how's the school different? Did the schools become different? And as silly as it may sound, I still have this belief and understanding, and I'd like to say a knowledge, that the world will change through our impacts, right? But what we tend to do is see outcome, and not even necessarily, or sorry, I keep always am doing this. We see output. We get excited about how many kids we had or how many adults we had. We don't look at outcome, let alone impact. And Alicia said something, I thought I saw Alicia, said something about, no, I didn't write it down. People coming to church. Where did I find that? Oh, darn, I know I wrote it down. There it was. That about outcomes and people, there'd be more participation in their Sunday morning. Maybe it wasn't Alicia, but that one of with her magic wand, that would be greater participation in the groups with that is outcome. What I would want to see even deeper than that, or how I want to challenge you all to reframe it, is there's a desire to come. One of the ways we measure growth, there are 6 ways I found to measure growth, and one of those is to measure spiritual growth, and an indicator of that is that there's a higher percentage of your people engaged in study of some sort, be it Sunday school, midweek programming, prayer groups, whatever that is. I look for percentages, right? Over time. And so when your percentages grow, then you know people are growing spiritually. Worship is another place. When your participating membership and your average worship attendance begin to close. Although hopefully your average worship attendance is always going to grow more than that, because it tells you that's an evangelism growth indicator as well. Does that make some sense? So there's some outcome for you. How is your congregation growing? Numbers are an evangelism measurement. But if you really want to measure discipleship in how people are becoming disciples, then you're going to look at giving and percentage giving. How, this is not brain science or surgery or whatever that is, that you can't, it's not exact. So you can't, finding the qualitative or quantitative information is not that simple. So I can't look at a person and know for fact whether they're tithing or not, but I can get an idea of what their income is. I can look at what their giving is and get a sense. Are they going up percentage-wise? Are people talking about that? Are they excited? So it's qualitative, but you've got to do some quantitative measurements in there. Otherwise, we fool ourselves. One of the questions that was asked to me early on when we were doing the church planting by a regional minister was, it had to do with the percentage of people that were giving and what those percentages look like. Because they said that so often percentages will go up because it's the minister, the church planter, who's giving, and then but they're not building disciples. My language, they're not building disciples who are going to be giving. One of my most joyous moments is a woman who called me on Thanksgiving Eve, when I was at Bellevue Christian, and she said, they called me Pastor Chris then. She said, "Oh, Pastor Chris, I'm so sorry for bothering you, at home the night before Thanksgiving, but I felt like I needed to tell you this." She said, "The Lord's really been working in my heart, and I believe I'm supposed to tithe. And I've just changed jobs. I'm not making as much as I was. I don't really know how I'm going to do that, but the Lord has laid it on my heart to do that. And so I want to commit to tithe for the next year." And I said, "Are you sure you can meet your basic obligations by doing that? Because the Lord does not want you to ruin your credit and all." And she said, "I have accounted for all of that. I'll have to give up like eating out or whatever that was, but I'm going to do that." What did that tell me? That our discipleship efforts were working, that this woman was open enough to God, and we'd given her some basics about what that looks like, that she was moved to do that. Right? Okay. Questions? Make sense? Okay, good. Outcomes, outcomes, impact, thinking bigger, and beyond. Alicia asked about methods of evaluating. So ways of doing that, if you're using studies, evaluating what your, if you will, curriculum is, what your study material is, ask people. You can come up with that short survey. And I know Amy has a question about survey, but just every so often, if it's ongoing, at the end of a quarter, do a check-in with it, or at the end of the study, have a half sheet of paper and have 3 to 5 questions. I always like to use them where you have the numbers 1 through 4 or 1 through 6. Never use odd numbers where they can choose in the middle, right? You want to do you not really, are you not there, or are you there in some way? So if you use 1 to 4, something like, what did you learn something in this on a scale of 1 to 4? Did you learn something in this study, with 1 being nothing, to 2 something, 3 a bit, and 4 being a lot, and you can like make a lot there, then put lines underneath there. What did you learn? You can, and then you can follow that with another question, more lines. What do you wish you'd learn? Another question is, how does this change the way you relate to God? Or did this study change the way you relate with God? Something like that, right? If you're working on discipleship, or how does this study grow you closer? Did this study help you grow closer to God? If yes, why? How? What? Or how did it, if you don't want to use the 1 through 4, how did this help you grow closer to God? And then, what was your favorite part of the study? What was your not so favorite part of the study? Do you see how I phrased that in a positive, right? Not so favorite part. Don't open the door for them to talk about hate or disliking it. And as Amy pointed out to me, that a lot of people, the responses you'll get are those who really loved it, or those who really didn't love it. Do it at the beginning of the class, and again, of the study. And just tell them, this helps us better understand how effective our learning is, what we're offering. And then remind them of that vision that you have for your education ministry, or your church, right? That, and just state it. We have our vision, or our mission is to invite, equip, disciple, or not equip, connect, invite, connect, disciple, and go. And so we're measuring our effectiveness at doing that. And if your mission is very clear, if you've got that and you can put it into 3 or 4 questions, then measure for that. How did this study help you? Questions? This stuff is not easy, is it? Well, it's easy. It's not simple, right? It takes work. And for those of us who love when they hand you the curriculum that you only have to look at Sunday morning, preferably Saturday night, if not sooner, oh my gosh, now you want me to measure this? But how effective do you want your church to be? And let's be real. If your church isn't effective, it's not going to be sustainable. And you can talk about getting more butts in your seat. You can, get more butts in the seats. But the reality, if people are not finding value, if they're not growing, they're going to go somewhere else where they are and can. And it's not about being a mega church. It's not about being in a church where they can offer all of these different pieces. It's, it's about are you connecting me with God? How is my life changing? And that's an more immediate outcome. Okay. Questions? More detail. Chrissy, are you going for your microphone? No. Okay. Here's 1 through 6, 1 through 4. Be careful about how you use surveys. And then I'm sure that this is how Amy was asking the question, the way I just responded to it. Don't do it full church, do it per class. And ask yourself, if you're working with your pastor, you really want to be looking at your mission and vision and asking, what are we providing that helps extend that? And here's a creativity piece. It's not all Sunday morning. And I said this, I responded to Tim this morning, one of the Tims, and said, there are a lot of churches where the midweek programming is bigger than the Sunday morning programming. And what we do midweek is just as important as what we do Sunday morning. And Sunday morning may not be feasible for your congregation. So if you're having trouble getting pieces together on Sunday mornings, look at what your alternatives may be. And one of the coolest midweek programs I've seen was a church, New London First Christian Church. It's been 10 years ago. And they had, if they were lucky, 1 or 2 grandchildren, who were there on Sunday mornings. And so what they did was look at the number of children they had in their community, and they went and talked to the school and what were some of the needs for the school. And food insecurity was a huge problem for the school. So they worked it out that they would have a meal, and they would start, I think it was probably around 3:30 or 4, because they arranged, it's a small town, but they arranged for a bus to one of the school buses to go from the elementary school to the church. And they said to one another, the leadership said, in this very small congregation, we are on the brink of death. And we have no children, but we have this school that's nearby. So they looked at all kinds of programming, and there's, I don't remember now what it's called, but it's known at Baptist churches. A lot of Southern Baptist churches use this one particular program, and they decided they were going to do that, and they were going to see how it goes. So one of the members did carpentry work, and he made cubbies for the children so that when they came, they could put their backpacks into their cubbies and whatnot. So within a month, he had to build more cubbies. And within a few weeks after that, he had to build more cubbies and more cubbies. And they had like 25, 30, then 40, 50 kids coming on Wednesday evenings, more people than they had on Sunday mornings. And their biggest problem was, how are they going to get more people to be involved? Because there were the naysayers. There were those who said how horrid the Wednesday evening program was, but the leadership just kept saying out there, saying out there, saying out there. And then people came and started to really, really help and to work and to see that joy. And they finally got into their head, this is important. And if you can show outcomes, right, keep speaking the outcomes, people are going to help if you're raising up disciples. And I know I've said this, that your first investment in an educating, if you're going to have an educator type minister, is not a youth minister. It's a faith formation, discipling, call them what you want, family pastor, adult pastor, because as your people grow and they grow in their discipleship, they're going to want to do other pieces.
Is that Awana's? Is that what?
Yes, it's Awana. Yes, 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 it was Awana. Thank you. Wow, yes. Which is considered pretty conservative in many circles and was conservative for that congregation, but they knew they could do something with it. And I'll tell you another program that I think is still out there is Logos, Logos, Logos. And I love it. It centers around a meal, and part of how this works, they have tables and they have table parents, I think they're called, for each table. So it's geared for children. And so you have two adults at each table when the food is served. You have children go to get the food. It's not buffet style. They what is that called? Not buffet. It's like family style, I guess. So there will be a couple children at each table will go and get the food and bring the food or cart the food over there to the table. You put tablecloths on the tablecloths. You're just really doing it. And so the children, in over and over again, you hear how the children then go and they want tablecloths at home. They're learning manners and they're taking that out with them. They're learning how to have conversation. And the conversation in Logos is always around whatever the topic is, the theme or the topic is for that afternoon, evening. Old programs. I'm old, I know. You probably know of others that work, but if it works, it works. And how do you mold it? How do you take just some basics and mold it and meld it to be what works in your context? Questions, thoughts? Okay. I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about surveys first, in general surveys, and then about bad fits, what we do with bad fits in the people who are working in our ministries. I am not a fan of surveying people. If you've got connections with people, you already know. And for disciples and disciplesdom, one of our favorite times to use surveys is when we're looking for a new pastor. And so we survey the congregation to determine what the congregation wants. The problem is it's not what the congregation wants, it's what the congregation needs, right? So I cannot say this enough, build bridges, build bridges, build bridges. Where are you? Where are you going? How do you build the bridge to get there? So I can tell you what your congregation wants in a new pastor. They want somebody who preaches well. They want somebody who will grow the church. They want somebody who will raise more money. And they want somebody who will visit the people when they're sick and maybe even the shut-ins, depending on the size and context or location of your church, right? Over and over and over again. So we look at videos of the minister and we want the one who can really preach well, that upfront piece. Do they have families? Often we want a younger pastor because they bring families with them, and we can have an instant youth group or instantly grow our youth group. They'll ask questions about money, how are you going to raise money. So I am so beyond not a fan of surveys. And yeah, one of my sadnesses in Mid-America was that we did away with that up here in the Northeast area of Mid-America. And then a couple of the churches that we're connected with, they were in pastoral search and they were using a survey with them. Please, come on, you know what they want. So same for your folks. What do you want in an education? It's not what you want. What do you need to be offering? So that's part of your bridge, right? How do I get people to that next place on the bridge? How am I going to grow their heart? How are we going to help deepen their faith so that they want to be in it would so they want to be growing their faith? Okay. Book study. Yeah, I think a lot of times what we offer is we offer, maybe not a lot of times, sometimes what we offer, we think people are going to come because of that. So we will offer interfaith. Like um, let's learn about other faiths. And all I have to ask you back with that is, how is that helping grow someone's faith? Please don't stop. How are you growing their faith? How are you taking them next level? The One of the most significant books in my life, again, really old, Carol Mayhall, her husband was in the Navigators, um, Bill Mayhall. She wrote this book back in, I think it was in the late 70s. I didn't get it until 84, called From the Heart of a Woman. And she had all of these ways of praying. And she talked about Bill went to Bible college and he had to be in a small group as part of his Bible college experience. And she he was in a small group, and here she was by herself at home, just really isolated. They'd moved away from family and friends, and she was just getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And Bill said to her, you have to do something. You're just becoming so bitter. And so the book then talks about some of the things she did and how she grew and how she became more and more reliant upon God. And one of the stories after all these years that I remember was not having enough money. They just didn't have enough groceries to get through, and how she kept laying that out, laying that out, laying that, and coming home and finding groceries on her doorstep, this one day. And she talked about having prayer groups and the importance of having prayer group. And we went through a pastoral shift about that time. And I went and asked our new pastor if we could have a prayer group. And he said, yeah, definitely. He lived in Kansas. This was in Atlanta. And he said, oh my gosh, we had a prayer group in, I was part of a prayer group there. Definitely, let's get one started. And so we started this prayer group. And I think at its highest, there may have been, Teresa, thank you, bye. At its biggest time, at its largest time, we might have had 12, but probably more around 6, 8, 10. And it taught me how to pray, and taught me about trusting God, and that you can ask for anything, like a refrigerator that is about to die, but it's going to be 4 weeks before you can afford the $50 for a new used refrigerator, and that refrigerator making it through those 4 weeks and dying the night before you're set to pick it up. Right? That's just one of those pieces. And so when my faith faltered in college, really faltered and was at this crossroads, what my pastor said to me was, Chris, do you not remember all of the answers to prayer that we've seen over these last 4 years? Oh, yeah, I did. How can you deny that regardless of what people say? Output, outcome. And then I'd like to say there's impact, because today I've taught literally hundreds and maybe over 1,000 people through teaching and through workshops. It's definitely over 1,000, because I've spoken to groups of hundreds at a time. And I know those lives have changed. That's impact. And that directly goes back to Carol Mayhall in that book. Okay. Bad fits. What do we do with bad fits? Again, it is so much about relationship and conversation. So if you're leading, say you're the Christian education person, churches used to have Sunday school superintendents. You're checking in with them on a regular basis, even each week, and you're asking them, what was your biggest woohoo this past week? What did you struggle with this past week? What do you need from me? How can I help you? Not can I help you? How can I help you? It's about relationship. And when you see that they're faltering, then having that relationship, you're able to say, okay, here's what I'm seeing. How are you feeling about that? And if you're asking them those questions each week and you're building that relationship, they're going to tell you what their struggle is or what their struggles are. And that they're opening up the conversation. And Sam, was it you? Someone said about when people are unhappy, they'll just disappear, right? They'll become absent more and more or sadder and sadder. So we want to get them out of there. It's about them and it's about the ministry. Other ways of approaching that, again, many churches used to have nursery roles. If you're in a church that's been around for a long, long time, you may have a nursery role, ROLL. And in Yates Center First Christian Church, we had a woman who was 93 who was still keeping the nursery role. And you have the nursery role to help follow the children so that you're on it when it's time for them to be baptized, make a profession of faith and baptized. And you know, it's a beautiful attendance piece. It's really cool. Anyways, everybody wanted Ora Swope, O-R-A, Ora Swope. Everybody just thought it was time for Ora Swope to step by. And there's no way you're going to have that conversation with Ora Swope. But when you sit there and you talk to Ora Swope for any amount of time, Ora starts to tell you about her concern of who would take on that, you know, who would continue that ministry. And you can have a conversation about an apprentice who will be there for her, right? So who are you apprenticing? It's the bus principle. If you got hit by a bus tomorrow, then who's gonna be there to do the ministry? All ministries need to have two people. Questions, thoughts, pushbacks. Wow, this is easy. Okay.
Dr. Kirst.
See.
So the one thing that we do, so we're a medium to large size church. So we on our weekly staff meetings that we do, or our ops meeting,
I love that.
we sometimes we will do what is our high, low, and Buffalo. And yeah, so like what's the odd story or what's a good story, you know, that kind of thing. And when I have done some touch points, one-on-ones with our volunteers, I've kind of led with that as well. So it's like, tell me what's your high, low, and what's a funny story, or what's your Buffalo, right? So it seems very childish, and I will admit sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know. I have no idea. Right? So sometimes there's buy-in, and most of the time, especially when I do that with volunteers one-on-one, they're like, well, let me tell you. And it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, but okay. So yeah, it's that not being afraid of doing one-on-ones.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. I like that. High-low Buffalo. When I heard Buffalo, I was thinking getting run over. You know, what broadsided you? That's yeah. My bill with his pastors groups every week, he says, what's your, what's your win? What was your win? And that's a way of thinking in terms of output or outcome as well. What's your win? What did you see? Right. Okay. My clock says it's 10:09 and that's all I have. It's like, yeah.
I don't know. I tried to pull it up on my phone, that Clinton thing for this week.
It's
Yeah,
not.
it says he's deleted, or the author's deleted it. So I don't know if you were the author or he is.
I am the author.
Okay.
And well, yeah, I am the author. And I'm also with full credit to him. Yeah, I've got to find it. It's on one of my external drives and put it back up there. I noticed that. I thought I had gone through all of the resources at the beginning of the session, and that one somehow dropped out. So yeah, I'll get it reposted. I'll do that within an hour after we sign off. Okay. Okay. All right, let's see. Are you ready to say goodbye? Are you ready to pray out? Let's see. Sam, have you prayed us out yet? Okay, would you do that today?
Sure.
Thank you.
Gracious and loving Creator, we come before you this morning with hearts and minds that are shared in this growing experience this week. Let us reflect on all that we have learned in the past and all that we will learn as the weeks go forward. Guide us with your wisdom and with that grace. Help us to carry out that spirit of collaboration and faith into the work that we do, so that our efforts may be glorified in you, and that you nurture us as we serve those that we serve.
Yes.
Strengthen us as we move forward, reminding us that every day we are never alone on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
May your love continue to unite us and inspire us as we seek to build your kingdom with love, grace, and acceptance.
Yeah, thank you.
In your child's name we pray.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you again.